Bene, questo sembra essere uno degli argomenti che in BTO abbiamo scelto considerandolo uno degli argomenti dell'anno, ovvero l'esplosione della cosiddetta sharing economy. Il titolo del nostro speaker sulla sharing economy è strabiliante, ne abbiamo già parlato nell'intervista con Philip Wolf, ovvero nel futuro nessuno comprerà il turismo, già che albergatori e agenti di viaggio si sono impauriti. Chiamo on stage Neal Gorenflo from Shareable. Hello Neal, welcome to BTO.
Thank you very much, thank you very much.
We really want to see what you have to tell us about that.
Thank you, and I'll tell you, first thing is that my wife would not go for the gift sharing.
Okay, perfect. The stage is all yours.
Well, about 3 months ago, I got an email from Giancarlo inviting me to come to BTO, and I was about to just send him a no, and I really wasn't sure if I had anything to share about tourism. I'm no expert in tourism, but I thought I'd get him on Skype and hear him out. He said the community really wanted to hear about the sharing economy, about its potential impact or the impact it's having now. I really liked his energy, his commitment to the tourism community, the BTO community. And I accepted the invitation on Skype. Then I got off Skype, and I still didn't know exactly what I was going to talk about. But I thought about it for a couple of weeks, and like a lot of things in life, the answer was right underneath my nose. And what I realized was that the way my Silicon Valley friends and the sharing community that I write about on shareable.net, the way that they travel is very different and could be an indicator of where tourism is going. The way that my Silicon Valley friends are traveling is also potentially a big threat to the tourism industry. And what they are doing is routing around traditional tourism to create unique, even transformative travel experiences, often with locals that they meet ahead of time online. And so they're hacking travel. And if they're any indication of what's to come, then no one is going to buy tourism in the future. And let me unpack that a little bit for you. What I mean by tourism is prepackaged, mass-produced, passively consumed travel experiences. And so my talk today is simple enough. It's to explore that threat with you, and then offer some ideas about how you can respond and be successful. And as big as the threat is, I believe that the opportunity is even bigger, and not just in financial terms, also in terms of social impact. This next generation of travelers coming up not only want to have fun, but they also want to kind of change themselves, change the world. And so you have a unique opportunity to help them do that and do good in the world and also do well for yourself financially. And so to dive in, I'm just going to start by telling you a story about a travel hacking experience that I had going to South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. And I was faced with this, a $300 generic hotel experience downtown in the most kind of sanitized part of Austin. I thought it was expensive and it would be boring, and I probably wasn't going to connect with the local community. And Austin has this reputation, they have on bumper stickers and t-shirts and hats, keep Austin weird. And I wanted to get into the funk and the weirdness of Austin. And so I, gave up the hotel search and went on Airbnb, and I found this. The Tiny Pink Mansion. It's a trailer in a trailer park filled with art And those are styrofoam griffins at the entrance to the trailer. And my idea was, instead of staying in the center of the sort of sterile center of town, I would stay outside in a funky neighborhood in a trailer park and connect with the local community, spend half as much money. The money would go to Flip Solomon, who's the Airbnb host, single mom, artist, bartender. I thought that would be a better place for the money. Instead of a big chain hotel, it would go out of the local economy. And one of the things that I was planning on is to use her bike. So she had a bike that she said was available, and she actually flaked on the bike. And I think that's part of the message of this new way of traveling, is to expect the unexpected a little bit, both the good and the bad, that brings the experience, I think, alive a little bit more. And so when I got there, no key for the bike, and across the trailer park was this micro house. The guy who lived there, Eric Luckett, he had sold his trailer to buy a pickup truck and then built himself this house out of plywood. And I saw the bike in the front yard, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go over there and see if he'll let me borrow or rent that bike. And that's exactly what I did. And in the process, I had this conversation with Eric Luckett. He gave me a tour of his micro house. Really down-to-earth, funny guy. And on his hat, it said, Eric Luckett, writer and artist. And I said, so Eric, show me your art. And he goes, you're looking at it. And so very, very down-to-earth, like Austin eccentric. And I thought that was really funny. So I got the bike, and this is a picture of the bike. And it was a perfect bike. I probably put like 50 miles on it. It's got like this dog chain to lock it up, and it's broken down enough that no one would ever steal it, but working well enough that I got all around. And so I got to stay in that funky neighborhood and just go back and forth between the conference and the trailer park, and then also to other parts of town. So instead of having lunch in the downtown area and paying higher, prices and standing in long lines with the rest of the conference attendees, I'd take a 10-minute bike ride to this food court truck and meet my friend Paul Davis, a local there, and we'd have lunch. And the place was super informal, come as you are. Some of the food truck operators would come out and chat with you. The prices were reasonable, and there's no extra charge for the attitude that they kind of delivered with it. So it wasn't the normal like tripping over themselves to help customers. It was a much more a peer experience. Every time we went to lunch, we'd sit down and meet a local, and someone would join us. And this is Christine, and she was in town for a radical street art festival, which I had never heard of. And so it was cool to have a conversation with her, learn something new. Very cool, like artistic, creative person, and that was pretty common. Now, the question you might be asking yourself right now is this the workings of a cranky, cheap, aging, wannabe hipster, or is this an indication of things to come? Well, I really think it's the latter. I think that something transformative is happening, something systemic, a systemic change of culture and technology, and that a new generation of travelers is coming up that will change everything. And so how do we get to know this generation? Because when I started Shareable, and we launched in October 1st, 2009, and we did a lot of research, and sharing in the United States is kind of a sensitive topic. We thought it could remind people of communism, and we weren't really sure how to talk about it. Do we talk about it as a green thing? We didn't know. So what we did is we did what's called a semantic network analysis, and we took 2 months worth of delicious.com data, tag data, and when you have two co-occurring tags for a website, that creates a connection. And when you analyze the data and create a map out of it, you see a network, and you can see how terms are connected. And we used it as a kind of proxy for how people think, and the kind of connection of ideas, the network of ideas for people who are on the web, people who are online. And what we found was that sharing was not thought of at all as a green thing. Actually, at the bottom left of this map is the sharing node, and at the other end, at the top right, is the green ideas, sustainability, green, etc. And on this map, when you read this map, and it's kind of hard to read, so but the upshot is the further distance from the terms, the more cognitive distance there is. And so you don't want to talk about sharing as a green thing in this case. Rather, the terms that we found here, open source software, the commons, free culture, Web 2.0. So we realized that we needed to talk about sharing through the lens of net culture. It sounds like completely obvious now, but the lesson and the message here is the internet is like another country. You have to know the values and the practices of that community to sell something or create an offering to that community. And you can't sell fiats in America using Italian language ads, right? And this really raised a question with me. You know, I wanted to dig deeper. If I wanted to learn even more about how to talk about sharing, and this also applies to anything, tourism included, I thought, well, let's find the first tribe of this culture and learn what they valued, okay? I thought that this was going to be a sort of messy exploration, but it wasn't. It was really clear, and I could really pinpoint where I think the most important stream of net culture started. And it's Boston, Massachusetts, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Building 26, in 1959. And so what was important about this is there was a group of students, engineering students, and these are like uber nerdy, like pocket protector, thick glasses, you know, some hygiene, maybe some hygiene problems, you know, just intensely interested in how things work. The Model Railroad Club, it was sort of shorthand for their systems thinkers. They wanted to know how to operate a train network. This got them interested in computers, and they found this TXO computer in the basement and were able to get access and start programming on it. And they created a subculture around this activity, their own language, values, and rituals. They called themselves hackers, but this is not the hackers, the type that, you know, in the popular media that break into computers. This is the original meaning of the term, which is someone who makes something, in this case, software. And, you know, they were the first hackers, and what they started there changed computing forever and is now transforming our world, including travel. But it wasn't so much what they made there as much as it was how they made things, how they did things, and the ideas behind it. And this is the hacker ethic. And this is kind of a Rosetta Stone for net culture, if you want to understand net culture. So I think it's really important. And so just to go through some of the main points of the hacker ethic. First and foremost, they believed in the hands-on imperative, which meant that everybody should have access to all technology, in fact, anything in the world, so that they could understand it and improve it. That there is no black boxes, no limits on learning and creativity. They insisted on free access to tools, knowledge, and information. They believed that important resources should not be left idle, that everyone should have access to them and put them to use, and that they shouldn't go to waste. And the way they worked is they worked open collaboration. They kept their files open so any of their friends could work on what they were working on, find bugs, add features. And they worked on what they were passionate about. They worked as equals without hierarchy. They were suspicious of authority and bureaucracy. And any authority that there was, it was earned. You know, if you pulled off the elegant hack, you were the cool kid. You got respect. And they prized informality and fun and practical jokes. And they believed that computers could make the world and life a better place. And later, when they began working for Marvin Minsky, who became famous for his work in artificial intelligence, it became clear that this way of working was highly productive, that there was no way that Minsky could get the software he needed by paying private contractors who would work in the traditional way. That these guys, the kids, could produce it faster, cheaper, better, by an order of magnitude. That sharing and collaboration was just a better way to get things done, and you could have fun. And you could see sort of how this relates to the sharing economy and how our economy is changing. So what does this have to do with tourism online? I think everything. That, 10 years later, on the same campus, the same tiny subculture, we're the ones that built the first version of the internet. And this group had soaked up the religion at its source. They had the same belief in decentralization and sharing and collaboration, and they expressed their values in the design of the internet. And that's relevant today because the first generation raised on the internet is coming of age, coming to power, and they've used the internet all their lives, and that value system, which is embedded in the internet, they have internalized, and they see the world through the lens of net culture. They expect the world to work like the internet, and they are hackers at heart, even if they don't know it, and they want to hack everything, not just computers, and hack, of course, also travel. So let's take a look at what the sharing economy is and how it's changing the economy, and then we'll dive into like some of the impacts I see to tourism, and then some things that we can do about it. So I look at the sharing economy as a shift from a top-down factory model of society, a sort of classic Fordist organization, to a peer-to-peer, networked model of society, and a shift from a culture of shopping and competition, brought to its height in the post-war by broadcast television, to a culture based on sharing and collaboration, empowered by the internet and net culture. And while this transformation has been underway for a long time, I'm going to get some water here. Only now are some of these empowering technologies available to the ordinary individual, and this is making them the most empowered individuals probably in history, and they're able to produce, consume, and organize themselves in new network ways, and ways that only big companies could do just a few years ago. We're right in the middle of that. And this impact is across all sectors of society. Old and new sharing innovations are on the rise across the board. If you go on shareable.net, there are hundreds of things that we're tracking, and they all seem to be proliferating or scaling. And, things like co-working, bike sharing, car sharing, ride sharing, co-ops, repair cafes, tool libraries, seed banks, crowdfunding, the list goes on and on. And the difference between, the past and now, though, is because some of those things have been around. Sharing is nothing new. The difference is that mobile and internet are enabling these to scale at a global level, and for individuals to transact with strangers with a high degree of trust and safety because of reputation mechanisms and trust mechanisms on some of the most important platforms. All the sharing economy platforms use these to a certain extent and make this possible. And the driver, it's kind of a perfect storm for sharing. First, I think the most important driver is a deep, systemic, extended recession. And it's giving people time to reconsider what is important to them, but they're also forced in some way to do things in a new way. At the same time, you have this new generation, new culture coming up, a values shift, and then a technology that makes it all possible to do things in a different way. And so, you have these significant long-term drivers and motivations combined with a means to do it. And with that, there's a technology progression, so from the mid-90s when we connected people to information to the mid-2000s where we connected people to people with social media, Facebook and Twitter, to today where we're connecting people, place, and assets in real time with the internet and mobile. And we're I think, just getting started in this last stage, though it seems to be progressing really quickly. And let's talk about some of the innovations here. I want to talk about the ones that are kind of directly pointed at tourism. About 4 years ago, I saw sort of a Cambrian explosion of these sharing applications led by Airbnb, and then there was this just one after another, sort of the Airbnb of everything, the Airbnb of X, of cars, of bikes, of neckties, dresses, parking spaces, babysitting, you name it. And I think everyone probably knows about Airbnb, but a whole ecosystem is emerging around it. And one good example of this is AirEnvy, which offers hotel-like services for Airbnb guests. Like a full suite of services, manage the listing, cleaning, key turnover, and also guide services in any sort of emergency. They can call 24/7, and they get a cut of the host's revenues. And they have different service levels depending on what you need. And then travel is no longer just, if you need to get around at your destination or even to your destination, it's not just a point A to point B exercise, it's travel with a local. So BlaBlaCar, one of the largest ride-sharing applications in Europe, they really foster this idea that drivers and riders should build a relationship and it should be a friendly social experience. Relay Rides is the largest US car-sharing service, and initially they sort of positioned their service neighbors sharing with neighbors, sharing cars with neighbors, and what they found that their biggest driver of demand were travelers, and so they introduced a new service that enables you to drop your car at the airport, get free parking, and you might make some money too. And people arriving at where you live can rent your car and do their trip using your car. And so I think that's really cool. I tried it out. It worked flawlessly. They had some problems with our car. They had to tidy it up a little bit. And then Spinlister, which is peer-to-peer bike sharing. And then I think what's really interesting, where you kind of see this travel like a local phenomenon take root, is in services like cooking, peer-to-peer dining. There's a bunch of these. There's meal sharing and a few others. And so initially they've positioned it like neighbor to neighbor, but some of them have just gone straight and positioned it for travelers. Have a meal with a local and experience the local cuisine. And then Viable is a peer-to-peer guide service. You can find a guide for something local that's not packaged, not a packaged tour, but something a little small-scale, artisanal. An example of that is in San Francisco. There's a guy who is a seafood forager. So you can get a tour of the coastline, and he'll show you what seaweeds and shellfish you can eat. Not something that normally you would get in a package tour. Okay, so now I want to talk about more examples and examples that are not directly targeted at tourism necessarily, but could be an indication of things to come, of a deeper transformation. Seats to Meet is a Dutch application that connects workers to open spaces in a variety of retail settings. It could be a hotel lobby or work center or a spare conference space. It could be an ice cream shop, or it could be a straight up co-working space. And the idea behind this is that for a worker, I can get on that and I can find where my tribe is in a new city, and then go and work with that tribe in an environment where friendliness and sociality is really expected. And it's for the founder, the idea is a kind of an extension of the conference experience, to sort of conference 2.0, so that there is opportunity to learn and connect every single day, any moment of the day. And what they try to do is increase the number of serendipitous connections. Those connections that we don't expect, we can't really plan for, that add a lot of value to our life and our work. Skill Shop. If you're a retailer, you can offer a class in something that is key to your trade. I think that education is going to be really important for this emerging group of travelers. Digital detox, this is something that got really big in California and the United States. People realizing that being online too much is actually not good for you, and then wanting to really unplug, get in touch with themselves and with others, and really think about what's important in their life and how they can implement that in their lives. This is really cool. A friend of mine, Chelsea, started this co-working abroad, and so take a group of startup entrepreneurs, take them on a trip to a cool place like Matera to Casa Neutral, a co-working and co-living space, and get the founders to start to work together and collaborate and help each other on their businesses. This is a group of friends of mine who are Jessie Shingler and her group of friends, and what they've been doing for 10 years is going to, with all their whole friend group, going to a different destination around the world to workshop their lives. This is one of their sessions, and they're innovators, and they want to do something and change the world. This is what they're on the planet for, what they believe they're on the planet for, and so they want their time away from work to really renew themselves and be better prepared, and to live and work well, or work better when they get back. And they've taken this to a new level too. This was so valuable to Jessie, my friend, that they wanted this kind of environment all the time, right? And so they started a network of co-living spaces. So co-living is like co-working, except where you live. It's an innovation and tech innovation community. And what's interesting about it is two things. First is that they, with these co-living communities, and there are about 20 of them in the Bay Area now, that it's really taking off, is that they always have rooms available for travelers, for people in their community that don't live with them full time, but are part of the community. And they want to network these. So then if you're part of the embassy network and you're in the embassy in San Francisco, if you go to another city or another co-living space in San Francisco, you'll be among like-minded people with the same mission and values, and you'll feel at home, and you'll get their knowledge about what's cool to do locally. You'll just go with them and you'll live locally. So what's important about this is that in this network world that's emerging, the difference between travel and ordinary life is completely breaking down, right? That it's, you don't have to have one or the other, you can have both. So just to wrap up, as some of these examples show, this next generation of travelers, they don't want to escape from their everyday lives and the world. They want their travel to really count, to help them delve more deeply into their lives and change them and the world for better. And there are just 3 quick principles to think about for your business. First one, education, especially skill building. These travelers want to take a new skill home. This could improve their life or work, but the sweet spot might be for you is to connect them to skills that are unique to your region, whether it be glass blowing, beer making, cheese making, something like that. Second principle, help them live like a local. Help your guests connect to the local community in multiple ways, behind the scenes, informally, and in both work and play modes. If you're in hotels, replace your business center and make it into a co-working center. Invite local professionals to work with your guests. Your guests will appreciate it. They can maybe improve their business, make new connections, learn something, and help them turn these into lasting relationships. And then also, third and last principle, focus on self and community improvement for this group. Empower your guests to have a transformative personal experiences, offer a platform for do that. Even better if the experience benefits the local community. So if you offer a cooking class in the regional cuisine, culminate it with a dinner with disadvantaged children. And so here's what I think, just the last parting thought. I believe that as we exit consumer culture and enter a new collaborative culture, you have the chance to return tourism to its roots and things like the Grand Tour and pilgrimages. And even if guests come to you as tourists, it would be good for your business if you left them as spiritually renewed and more capable citizens of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Neal. You need a headphone now,
Okay.
So I guess someone has an headphone for you. It's coming, right? So I shall call on stage, chiamo sul palco gli intervistatori del panel della Sharing Economy, che sono innanzitutto Fiamma degli Innocenti, smartica.it. Benvenuta Fiamma.
What's that? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Vi dico una piccola cosa, ho scelto l'argomento sharing economy, è un argomento molto nuovo. I 2 intervistatori, chiamo anche Stefano Daelli, che è il product manager di Marketing Revolution. Benvenuto Stefano.
Sì.
I 2 intervistatori che ho scelto, li ho scelti perché hanno pubblicato delle presentazioni eccezionali su SlideShare, le trovate, le loro presentazioni, proprio su questo argomento, che è un argomento molto dibattuto ma anche molto nuovo per l'Italia. La terza ed ultima intervistatrice di questo panel è Miriam Bertoli, founder of Miriam Bertoli, come dico sempre io, che invece è già un'amica di BTO e un'esperta in questo settore. Abbiamo di nuovo le 3 sedute italiane perfette per voi, mentre Neal andrà seduto dall'altra parte.
Okay.
E se ho la cuffia per lui.
Così lontani? Maestro.
Hi over there.
Hi.
We can, yeah, thanks.
Non mi arriva la cuffia per... we didn't get your headphones.
Yeah.
Sono spariti tutti gli assistenti. Qualcuno mi trova una cuffia per cortesia?
Io?
Per Neal? Nessuno. Perfetto. C'è qualcuno che gli fa una domanda in inglese intanto?
Sì, no, ma in realtà penso che la possiamo fare.
Facciamo in inglese.
Okay, so first of all, Neal, thanks so much for your
Yeah,
keynote
sure.
speech.
They're doing that in English anyway.
Okay, cool.
And
Come closer.
I know, right?
Come closer. First of all.
First, let me, hi. Good. Nice
I
to
think
meet you.
this will work better, yes.
Okay, that's good. I
Yeah.
think so too.
Yeah.
Should I
You
use
fit- you
these
fit-
then? Or do we just do it in
No, we
English?
are doing the question only in English.
Eh?
Yeah, we'll do it in English.
It's all in English, so
Perfect.
you don't need that.
Yeah, perfect.
Hello.
Now I can see your faces.
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, thanks for your keynote speech. It was really a wide view on what the sharing economy means, and it was inspiring because you've explained us why we should be interested and seriously look at it. So one of the most interesting parts, I think, is the part on travel like a local.
Right.
Yeah. So I live in Venice, and when tourists stop me in the calle on the street, they ask me for a non-touristic restaurants. So for places where I think the authentic part is more part of the experience. So the travel like a local, do you think it's here to stay, or is just something that we are looking for in these days?
I think it's here to stay, and I offered my talk as a kind of provocation. Realizing that this community is filled with very skilled and intelligent business people, and I think the answer is a little more nuanced. I think it is to stay. I think there is a group, and I think a growing group that will want the off the beaten path experience. Yet, in the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, I think people who never, are achieving middle class status, that the package tourism, because maybe they've never had it or their parents have never had it, that might be still very attractive, right? That they'll want that, and that kind of the high touch sort of, awesome hotel experience, all the trimmings, that'll still be attractive, yeah.
How is the sharing economy part can be, can have a strong impact on the travel like a local. So you've given us some examples like Viable or Eat With.
Right.
So where do you think we can really see the impact of a sharing economy in more authentic travel experiences?
Like what should hoteliers and people in the tourist business do, or yeah?
Examples, yeah.
Well, I kind of think of, like, Florence is really interesting because it has this history of being a global trade center, and connected globally, but also great connections locally, and a unique sort of civic culture locally, and I think a hotel can kind of mimic that, and a hotel can become a kind of community center where global travelers and local people can connect in multiple ways, not just business and fun, to create things actually, right? So I would really think of really kind of open sourcing your hotel. Like, how can you make it completely open and use all the resources that are there for the local community to benefit the local community, and then also attract more visitors?
So the open part, the opening of business.
Yeah, Hotel 2.0, right? Open source it, right? And involve the community in creating the kind of unique experience for the guests that are coming, right?
Okay, great. Thank you.
So yeah, I wanted to start from two things you mentioned to ask you a couple of questions. The first one, you mentioned four main drives of sharing economy. And two of them are, one is culture and one is tech.
Right.
So that made me think a lot. So starting from culture, you mentioned sort of next generation, okay? So you mentioned like the assumption is like young people trying to travel in a new way. So this is amazing, and this is probably where we are going towards. But what about the current generation? Like, what about the previous generations? I mean, this shift will need necessarily cultural change. So I believe, like you mentioned, we are going towards one profile of tourists,
right?
Because nobody will going to buy other traditional services. Okay, this is fantastic, but nowadays, like, look, going around Florence and going around like the world, you see many other profiles of tourists.
Right.
For instance, people who are not as open-minded as the sharing economy travelers, or people who want comfort, or people who are
Right, who want convenience, right?
or who want convenience. Or for instance, if I think about old people, they probably do not want to, maybe not want, but they're not as open as young people, young generation in this sense. And also, I think this big shift will go through a very deep cultural change that in different areas of the world will take different timings. So if you think about the US, sharing economy in the US developed very fast in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley. In the past 2 years, over the 50% of people said they used sharing economy services, whereas like in Italy, in the web population who use collaborative services is the 15%, and the 36% of people never heard of it.
Right.
So I'm just saying, like, it will take time, and it will take different timings in the different areas of the world. So what do you think about this? Do you think it will lead to like a sort of a misalignment of demand and supply?
I agree. And I think even the same individuals like myself have different travel preferences at different times, right? So, sometimes I really don't want to connect to the local community. I just want, a hotel. I need some time alone. I need to do work or whatever it is. I'm just tired. I want to go to sleep. And I guess, my talk was more, pointing towards the future, that this generation eventually will be the generation that takes over, and that these older generations, represent more of the past. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And going to the second point, technologies. I think internet is a key tool for the development of sharing economy. I mean, undoubtedly. But what about those countries where the internet access cuts off a wide part of the population? What is the future of sharing economy in those countries?
Well, for those companies, the sharing economy is not like this new, trendy thing in the newspapers. It's like everyday life, right? And so maybe for the time being, before, assuming technology will get there at some point, travel like a local may be the way things are already, and what people appreciate about traveling in the developed world. So, I mean, I think that's kind of my guess at the situation.
Okay. And what do you think will be the role of traditional players in the tourism industry in the development of sharing economy? Like, do you think that we'll see the development of sharing economy as a threat, or?
Well, in the developed world, depending on where you go, you might want to take a package tour because of, there might be certain risks and inconveniences that traveling by yourself, or language barriers, traveling by yourself, especially a country maybe like India or some countries in Africa where there's many dialects and it's not just one different language, it's many different languages, right? That kind of packaged thing really still makes a lot of sense. So, I think in the developed world and with net culture, which is a global culture all over the world, hundreds of millions of people online who absorb these values, that's a specific market to think about that I think is growing and will become more important, but certainly not the only market, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I want to address my question to another topic, that is regulation, because...
Uh-oh, hot potato. Here we go.
No, well, because you talk about a lot of cool models and startups and so on, like Airbnb, and the previous panel talked about Uber and so on. But when we look at that activities, we discovered that now we are facing very big problem with regulation. I don't know, for example, Airbnb versus New York State about the guest list and so on. The problem is that today regulations are designed by policymakers that live in a different kind of paradigm.
Right.
As this. So sharing economy models lay in a kind of gray area. We are both in and both out.
Right.
So what do you think about this? Are these threats really strong, or are just a kind of slowdown? And especially, how can we manage the problem, for example, private versus business activities, or acting global versus local regulation?
Yeah, I mean, regulation is a really big challenge. I know that the entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley have kind of committed to the strategy of,
Do then discuss.
Right, is like create a model that works financially and then sort the regulation out afterwards, right? And so far that's working out pretty well. What we try to do at Shareable when we write about this is to get people to think about the multiple stakeholders, to see the problem in a kind of holistic way, and for regulators to create new regulations that make room for these new things, but then balance the interest of all the stakeholders. Take for instance Airbnb. I mean, this is a really tricky problem. Think of the taxes. Hotels pay taxes that help in America go pay for things like the schools in cities, right?
In Italy too.
Right. So you don't want bad schools, right? You want that revenue. So you have to think about taxation. You also have to think about things like Airbnb is sucking up 1,000 properties a day into their system and changing the supply of real estate available to local residents. So you don't want your residential real estate to be taken up completely by travelers. And then, how are the young adults coming, the startup people, immigrants, low-income families? They need a place to stay too. So you have to think about them in this equation as well. So that's how we talk about it at Shareable and what we hope people will do. And in the cases of places like Hamburg and Copenhagen, they've come out with laws, new regulation around Airbnb that balance the stakeholders, I think, very well and are a model for other cities to follow.
And I just go on it because one of the main drivers that you talked about was a better world. And in fact, Airbnb, for example, is creating a better world because it kind of extracts richness from an idle space.
Right.
But on the other hand, there are less people that go to hotel, or if you use Eat With, you don't go to the restaurant, or if you use, I don't know, TripDidas, you don't go to a tour operator. So
right.
We are really creating a better world. It's just kind of shift.
I think it's a little bit of both. I know the management at Airbnb, and I think they're very sincere about creating a better world. But they've become so successful and having such a huge impact because of their size and the amount of properties that they have. That these other factors have come up as well. And thinking about better world, take for instance car sharing, which has been around a long time, kind of like a model for the sharing economy. One shared car replaces up to 13 owned cars. In North America, 50% of people who join car sharing join to get access to a car who didn't already have access to a car. And if a city is able to take 15,000 cars off the road, off the ownership rolls, it can keep an estimated $127 million in the local economy annually. In San Francisco, if you reduce the number of cars from 500,000 to 250,000, they could keep an estimated $2 billion in the local economy every year. So here's the thing that saves resources, makes the resources more accessible, and builds the local economy. So there is a big potential too.
Okay. And kind to provoking you, but so what about Detroit that builds car?
Yeah, I mean, some industry's going to lose.
Okay.
And they're adapting. They're going in. They're having their sort of Napster moment. Like what happened to the music industry. They've seen the writing on the wall, and most of the major car companies have a foot in ride sharing, and or car sharing, right? In Europe, it's like an 18-year decline in unit car sales, right? So they're adapting, and I think instead of fighting it, they're playing with it.
just a last one, very short. I think that one of the biggest threat to sharing economy is not the regulation or I don't know other problem related to financial balances, but is trust.
Right.
Because now the sharing economy community it's little and very connected, but if it scale up as you suggest, how this trust engine could work?
Well, I mean, trust is like the secret sauce, but I think to the sharing economy, but I think, it's overplayed a little bit. I think that people, depending on where you are in the world, certainly in the United States, my experience is that people trust each other more than they think they should, right? That our story about how trustworthy our neighbors are is different from what we actually do. And then when we get to meet and know someone, even online, if we have a mutual friend or they're part of a professional network that we're part of, this is enough of a pretext that we can do something pretty radical, like have them stay at our house, even though we've never met them, or let them use our car, or have them take them on a ride with us, Yeah, so trust is really important.
Okay, so a slightly different question since we still have time. We've been speaking on P2P, so it's people with people or companies with people. What about B2B? So maybe the next step is
B2B,
business
right?
to business, yes. So companies and companies sharing assets, sharing time, sharing knowledge, sharing...
Right, I mean, a B2B, like the sharing economy has been part of business, hasn't been called the sharing economy, but businesses really share. I mean, this is, I used to work for a couple of trade associations in DC, and, these bitter competitors would share all kinds of things, things that weren't core assets, but that needed to work on together to make their market work. I think some industries share more than others, but I think there is definitely, even though I think businesses are ahead in sharing and collaboration in some ways versus individuals, I think there's definitely room for them to share even more. For instance, things like barter exchanges to make their spare resources available to one another and get things done without cash, for instance. Yep.
Cool.
It's good?
Very good.
All right, thank you.
Grazie a tutti. Thank you, Neal. That was
thank
fantastic.
you so much. That was awesome, thank you.
Stefano.
Enjoyed it.